Joining me live now, Shadow Minister for Indigenous Affairs, Julian Leeser. Appreciate your time as you're up there and obviously getting involved in a lot of the policy discussion. Closing the gap, so much stems from education, your portfolio. Starting on something that's achieving pretty well, and this is according to the latest figures from the Productivity Commission, and that is 4 to 6-year-olds being in some form of education regularly, so preschool or the beginnings of school, but development is not on track. It's actually getting worse. What do you put this down to? So kids are getting to these places, but their overall development tracking worse.
So I made a speech today where I called for a new direction in Indigenous affairs, and I looked at the closing the gap targets. Only 8 out of the 19 do we report on annually, and that's not good enough in terms of ensuring we get the outcomes. It's one of the reasons that we called for an audit of federal spending in remote Indigenous communities, and I'm pleased that the Auditor-General has listed it as a possible issue for audit this year in this financial year. Look, it's pleasing to see some closing the gap targets improving, but there's still only 4 out of the 19. In too many of the targets in relation to education, it's not improving. And what I've said today is that we need to see a greater level of autonomy and flexibility in the delivery of education services in Indigenous communities. We need to see greater involvement of the private sector through non-government schools, which are getting great results, and also philanthropy partnered with government schools, which are also boosting things. That's essential Liberal principles to deliver better outcomes.
You alluded to that you're specifically advocating for more teens in remote areas to be going to cities, to boarding schools there, and talking about philanthropic avenues. But why are you so convinced this is a key part of the answer?
Well, I didn't talk about the boarding schools today in my speech, but I am convinced that the role of the private sector works. And the reason we know it works is because non-government school retention for Indigenous students is higher than non-government school retention for non-Indigenous students of the order of 91%. When you're looking at government schools, the retention rate is in the 50s. And so there's a huge gap in the performance between government and non-government schools in that regard. And what I think this indicates is that the flexibility and the autonomy that you get in the non-government sector is really important. When I've talked to outstanding government principals in Indigenous schools, like the principal at Cherbourg School in Queensland, he's been given greater autonomy and flexibility, and he's also been given investments from organisations like Clontarf and the Broncos to provide mentoring programs. That's what's helping deliver results. So my view is autonomy plus flexibility plus private sector investment. Clearly, the ABS tells us they are delivering better results. We need to apply that policy across the board.
When you talk about retention rates, are you wary perhaps of skewed numbers, that the type of kids to be selected to go, maybe it's a scholarship program, or the type that get the support to go as well, are going to be the type that are more likely to stay at school regardless?
Well, as I've said, government schools take all comers. That's part of their mission, and so you might expect that their rates would be lower. But what we're seeing in government schools where the rates are higher is we're seeing more autonomy and flexibility, and we're seeing the private sector investment. So yes, there are people who are being chosen to go on various scholarships, but also Indigenous communities themselves are calling for private schools to partner with them. Here in northeast Arnhem Land, they've partnered with a school in Sydney called Barker and created a school called Dupama Barker, which has terrific attendance results and is showing massive improvements, which is as a result of that flexibility in the delivery of the model. That's what we need to see more broadly across the sector. We don't need to see more dead-hand bureaucracy that thinks that the policies that apply in the cities should be exactly the same policies that apply in Indigenous communities.
In terms of convincing, obviously you want to convince Australians this is the best idea, but Indigenous communities as well, maybe they're convincing you it's a good idea from what you've been saying. Where do you sit on that? Because there's been a lot of debate around some of the town camps and whether people living in some of these situations are ever going to get a fair crack at life. Is it about having a priority of education and outcomes for the children, and how do you reconcile that with whether or not they will be able to keep up the same level of what some communities would say, make sure you have connection to country? Can they clash, those two priorities, and how do you reconcile that?
Well, what I think we're seeing in dozens of communities across Australia now is that Indigenous kids can walk in two worlds. And what this is all about at the end of the day, Tom, is choice. Allowing people the choice to live a Western lifestyle, a traditional cultural lifestyle, or the combination of both. But you cannot have that choice if the kids are not going to school and if they're not completing school. And so my focus is on ensuring we get as many Indigenous kids going to school and completing school with a meaningful piece of paper at the end that either leads to employment or further study. And for many people, that will take place by going from community, but for other people, it will take place by staying in community. Here in Northeast Arnhem Land, the Gumatj people have set up a system where they can basically stay in community for all of their education and get a non-government school education or a government school education. It's that level of choice which is really important because it enables people to walk in both worlds.
Any comment on the Prime Minister not there this year? He did say last year he'd go to all of them. He doesn't take a lot of holidays, but what did you make of him not being there?
Well, this is another broken promise from Anthony Albanese. I mean, we can't believe him on energy prices. We can't believe him on tax. And the people, Indigenous people in Australia, can't believe him when he makes a promise to them either. I think it's really sad.
Julian Leeser, we'll leave it there. Appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.
The opposition is accusing the government of